Henno, welcome back. This topic is really interesting for me. There's recent studies, I think, by Google showing that psychological safety is very much connected or very much the foundation of high-performing organizations. Now, many companies are looking for ways to increase, obviously, psychological safety, maybe also their performance. Balanced feedback is one of these ways to create that psychological safety. When did you first hear about balanced feedback? When did that cross your path?
That's a long time ago. I think it's maybe even 18 years when I was working in finance. Still, I met a CFO of another energy company, and he was explaining to me how he found a way to discuss more difficult topics. And make sure that his team opened up for feedback, and that was actually quite an interesting journey that he had to find out how this worked for him. So this is how he told the story to me. I will tell it now to you, Neil. So he told me that he had 3 people in his team. Let's say Frank, Marie, and Bob. And he said, well, Henno, at the end of the year, I thought very well about how the year was. I reflected, and Frank was someone who really did a great job. It was beautiful. Marie was so la-la. She did some things very well, but there were also some things, maybe some tips still for her to even improve. And Bob, that was a disaster. This is just metaphorical names, obviously. And then he asked me, so I'll ask you now, Niels, which of the 3 people after the meeting started to develop her or himself?
That's a tough one. I would say Marie, because she at least received some of the things that she could develop on more, and that's normally how I provide feedback to people.
Yeah. Well, it was not Marie, and it was not Marie since Marie was. This is what my friend said. She was a little bit frustrated about the fact that Frank got a big bonus, but she also saw Bob coming out of the room, and Bob was like steam out of his ears, and it seemed that what my friend told Bob, that Bob also had some tips for my friend. So that was a very difficult talk. So Marie felt like, it's probably Bob who needs to develop himself. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it was actually nobody. So it was not Frank because he didn't receive any tips. So he didn't have the feeling that he should develop. It was not Marie since she didn't receive this bonus for her development. And on the other hand, she saw Bob coming out of the room with a big pile of tips from my friend. And it was not Bob because he was very frustrated about what my friend told him. So at the end of the day, my friend spent a lot of time in getting across difficult messages, getting across compliments, hoping that people would then start to work on themselves to become better, to in the end become better as a team and as a company. But it didn't work. So what he did is he asked them back a couple of months later, and then he gave each and every of them both 1 compliment and 1 tip. So Frank, Marie, and Bob, they all got 1 compliment and 1 tip. Balanced feedback. Bookkeeper, right? So what do you think happened?
Well, I think it at least went better. I think your friend developed here. I don't know, though, because when you just told me that Marie didn't develop or didn't choose to develop after that first session, I don't know what's happening now, actually. What was the outcome?
Well, for Marie, it was exactly the same. Since the months before, she also got 1 compliment and 1 tip. But for Frank, it was pretty different. So maybe this was the first time in like 5 years that he suddenly got a tip. So for him, it was like, okay, what did I do wrong? Is something happening? And for Bob, obviously, it was the first time that he got a compliment and only 1 tip. But the biggest change was actually maybe not so much in the conversations, but outside, when they started to talk to each other, they found out that each and every one of them got 1 compliment and 1 tip. And that created a level playing field where they felt that they were not compared with each other, but compared with themselves. And a couple of months later, my friend asked them again, but then he said, I'm not going to give you 1 compliment and 1 tip alone. I also want to have 1 compliment and 1 tip from you. And he said this even opened the a willingness for people to listen to tips and to give tips to each other in a safe environment, since there's a very clear structure defined up front. Everybody will give the other person in the room one compliment and one tip. And this worked so well. It was so safe, this structure, that after that, my friend said, why should I have these discussions only one-on-one? Why do I all have all these beautiful discussions, dialogues? Why don't we all give each other one compliment and one tip? So that was the next step, where they, in the end, created a little book, a compliment and a tip for everybody. They shared the document, so everybody could read, for instance, 8 compliments and 8 tips for everybody in the team. And then they had a speed date session at the fireplace, and this is how they discussed the feedback. And this was a very safe structure in which it is possible to give each other tips. So I think the essence is that when you're not comparing people with each other, but with themselves, and you create a clear structure up front on how this works, then it's so much easier to share feedback, to share difficult points, since it's always balanced with good points and everybody is the same. And this is one of the ways to create a safe environment.
Yeah, and psychological safety. I see. So how often have you done this, implemented balanced feedback?
Oh, a lot. I think that with at least 80 or 90 teams, and all over the world, where actually the reactions are quite different. So there are cultures where people have really a problem to give a tip to a manager, to give each other tips. There are also cultures where it's difficult for people to give each other a compliment, since then people are like, what do you want from me? What is going on? So you have to go step by step. You cannot from day one say, okay, everybody gives everybody a compliment and a tip, and then we make a booklet, and then we go totally transparent. You have to go very slowly. But at the end of the day, I think that in at least 80% of the cases, it worked really well.
Okay. Yeah, because when you were talking, I wanted to ask you how difficult is it to implement, but so how do you get there then? How do you bypass basically those first concerns people have? The tiers that you mentioned, is it?
Yeah, by making sure that you don't immediately go to the last step that my friend took. So for my friend, it was also a journey. So first he started one-to-one by giving one compliment and one tip to one person, which is already an enormous change. Step 2. Asking the other person for a compliment and a tip next time, a couple of months later. Step 3, giving compliments and tips to everybody in the team. Step 4, making a booklet that you share transparent with everybody. Step 5, put in this booklet who the feedback came from, so that you can always go back to the person that gave the feedback. So it is a journey, and you need to go step by step.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. I can see why this works and improves psychological safety, although there are some hurdles that you need to take along the way, but it's a nice example. Thank you.
Thanks.